Good day, everyone. Our third week in basic calculus is all about the continuity of a function. In our past lessons, we have already studied about the limit of a function. Okay, so the limit is defined as the value that y approaches or our function approaches as x also approaches a given value. Okay, so this c is any given value. Okay, so habang ina-approach ni x yung value na to, ay nag-a-approach din si y sa certain value, and that is the limit. Okay, so we have evaluated the limit of the rational and transcendental function. Okay, so this value or this c, okay, so may or may not be included in the domain of our function. Okay, so in a graph, okay, so yun yung nakikita nating whole. Okay, so because if we evaluate at C, okay, so yung value ng ating y ay undefined. Okay, so but still our function has the limit. Okay, so ibig sabihin ina-approach niya lang yung value na iyon. Okay, so now we will be studying about the continuity of a function. So ano nga ba yung continuity? So first, we have the learning competencies. Okay, we will be illustrating continuity of a function at a number. Determine whether a function is continuous at a number or not. Illustrate continuity of a function on an interval, and we will solve problems involving continuity of a function. Okay, so kapag narinig natin yung salitang continuous, okay, continuity, so meaning, so in Tagalog, no, siya ay tuloy-tuloy. Okay, so continuous means no interruption, okay, and tuloy-tuloy lang yung ating function. Okay, so now for our introduction, we will be determining if the graphs given are continuous or not. Okay, so for our first graph, okay, so determine natin by just looking at the graph if continuous ba yung ating function. Okay, so we will trace our graph from the leftmost part up to the right. Okay, so pagdating dito sa part na to, okay, so nagkaroon siya ng putol. Okay, pag tinrace natin ang ating graph and nagkaroon ng putol, okay, so we can already say that the graph or our function is not continuous. Let's move to the next example. Okay, as I trace the graph from the left up to the right, okay, so wala akong na-encounter na interruption. So, hindi naputol yung graph and wala akong hole na na-encounter. Thus, I can say that this graph is continuous. Next, so you can try it yourself by just looking at it. Okay, so may nakikita ba tayo interruption, hole, or putol sa ating graph? So wala po. Thus, we can say that this graph is also continuous. Okay, so that's basically it by just looking at our graph. Okay, so we can tell if the graph is continuous or not. Okay, so what if ang given naman sa atin ay, okay, so we have our function already and we will just graph it using the Desmos app or the Desmos website, and we will determine if the following function is continuous and which is not. Okay, so for our first one, f of x is equal to x squared minus 1 over x plus 1. Okay, so we will be using our Desmos graphing calculator. Okay, so I will show you. Okay, I will show you how to use our Desmos calculator. So we will simply type our function. So as is, f of x is equal to x squared minus 1 over x plus 1. So f of x is equal to x squared minus 1 over x plus 1. Okay, so as we can see here is, so we have the straight line here in our graph of the function. Okay, so nung dumating sa x is equal to positive 1, so nagkaroon tayo ng hole dito. Okay, so we have encountered an interruption in our graph. Thus, we can say that this function is not a not continuous. Okay, so I already included in the PowerPoint yung graph and also the whole. Okay, so the first function is not continuous based on our graph. Okay, so for our second, f of x is equal to x squared or 1 over x plus 2. So as I trace the graph from left, okay, so pagdating sa x is equal to negative 2, so naputol. Okay, so we have what we called a vertical asymptote here. Okay, so hindi tuloy-tuloy na na-trace yung ating graph. Thus, we can say that this function is not continuous. Okay, let's have the third example or function. F of x is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1 over x squared minus 1. Okay, so by just looking at the graph, we encountered an interruption in our graph and we have a vertical asymptote at x is equal to 1. So we can say that this function is also not continuous. For our fourth example, we have f of x is equal to 2 minus x cubed. Okay, so as I trace the graph of this function, okay, so wala akong na-encounter na any interruption, even a hole, even a cut in the graph. That's why we can say that this function is continuous. So next we have the two piecewise functions as example. So first, f of x is equal to 3 as for x is less than or equal to 1 and 2 minus x as for x is greater than 1. So paano natin gagamitin yung ating Desmos calculator using, okay, so for this piecewise function. So 3, so we have two conditions. So tatype lang natin yan, f of x is equal to, we'll just simply type f of x. Okay, so for the first condition, we have 3 and then bracket. Okay, for x is less than or equal to 1. Okay, so that is for the first condition. And for the second one, we have f of x is equal to, okay, 2 minus x for x is greater than 1 naman. So, x minus 2. Okay, so 2 minus x for x is greater than 1. Okay, so we used the Desmos graphing calculator for the piecewise function. So for the first condition, we have here the f of x is equal to 3 for x is less than or equal to 1. Okay, so ito po yung graph niya. Okay, so for the second one, we also have this graph. Okay, so let's see. So as we trace our graph from left to the rightmost part, okay, so trace natin. So at x is equal to 1, okay, so naka-encounter tayo ng cut sa ating graph. So masasabi natin that this graph is not continuous. Okay, so for our last example, ito po yung kanyang graph. Okay, so f of x is equal to x plus 1 for x is greater than 1 and x squared plus 1 for x is less than or equal to 1. Okay, so as we can see here in our graph, so magkadikit siya. Okay, and tuloy-tuloy yung ating graph. Thus, we can say that this function is continuous. Okay, so by looking at the graph, we can already say that a function is continuous or not. So easily, okay, so madali lang kapag ang given sa atin ay graph. So for our guide questions, we will be answering this. So first one, how did we use the Desmos app in graphing the given function? So we just simply typed the given function, okay, and then the Desmos app already showed us the graph of our function. Second, when do we say that a graph is continuous or not? Okay, as we trace our graph, okay, we can say that the function is continuous if we do not encounter any interruption, any hole or any cut in our um, function or graph. Okay, so if we, on the other hand, if we encounter any of those, we can simply say that the function is discontinuous or not continuous. Okay, so for the definition, the continuity of function at constant c. So we have a given value. Okay, so titingnan natin kung ang function ba natin ay continuous or tuloy-tuloy at a given value of x. Okay, so a function is said to be continuous at x is equal to c if there is no interruption in the graph of f of x at c. There is no hole, jump, or gap at x is equal to c. So upon tracing the graph of a function, you are not going to lift your pen at x is equal to c. Okay, so once you lift your pen, it means that the graph of function is discontinuous at x is equal to c. So let's have an example. Okay. So let us evaluate or let us test if the function is continuous. Okay, so at x is equal to 1. So titingnan natin if continuous ba ang ating graph at x is equal to 1. So at x is equal to 1, naka-encounter tayo ng hole. Okay. So thus, the function or the first graph is not continuous at x is equal to 1. Next, so in this graph, if we are going to trace our function, so we have to leave the pen at x is equal to 1 as well. So dun nagkaroon ng cut. Thus, this means that this graph is not continuous at x is equal to 1. Okay. Next, for our third example, so is this graph continuous or not? Okay, so in this graph, we can notice that if we are going to trace, we are not going to leave the pen. Okay, so the graph is continuous and we have encountered no interruption. So this means the graph is continuous at any value of x. So we didn't experience lift in the pen and there are holes or jumps in. There are no holes, okay, or jumps in the graph. So now, what if we do not use the graph and we are given only the function? Okay, so how can we say that the function, so without graphing it, okay, so can we say that the function is continuous or not? So the answer is yes by using the three conditions of continuity. So gagamitin natin to test a function, okay, if it is continuous or not. So a function f of x is said to be continuous at x is equal to c if the following three conditions are satisfied. So first, we have f of c exists, okay, meaning if we substitute the value of the given value c in our function, okay, so may makukuha tayong value. So any value, wag lang undefined. So magkakaroon lang tayo ng undefined if magkakaroon tayo ng 0 sa denominator. For our second condition, okay, so the limit of f of x as x approaches c must also exist. Okay, so we are evaluating the limit. Okay, so pag nag-evaluate tayo ng limit, we also substitute the given value c dun sa ating function. Okay, so if we encounter 0 over 0, okay, so it means indeterminate in form. Okay, so this means we can still simplify our function. Okay, and thus, okay, may makukuha pa rin tayong limit. But if may value sa numerator tapos 0 sa denominator, so the limit will not exist. Okay, so for our third condition, f of c must be equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches c. Meaning, yung makakuha nating value dito sa dalawang condition, 1 and 2, must be equal or the same. So if at least one of these conditions is not met, so kahit isa lang na hindi ma-meet, okay, so we can already say that the function is not continuous or discontinuous at x is equal to c. So let's try some examples. So for the first one, determine if f of x is equal to x squared minus 2x at plus 3 is continuous at x is equal to 1. So we will be using the three conditions for continuity of a function to check if the given function is continuous at x is equal to 1. Okay, so for the first condition, if x is equal to 1, then we'll simply substitute 1 to the x. So f of 1 is equal to 1 squared minus 2 times 1 plus 3. That's why we get a value of 2. Okay? So may nakuha tayong value which is 2. Thus, f of c exists. Okay? So nasatisfy yung first condition. Let's now move to the second condition. So we'll be evaluating the limit of the function as x approaches 1. Okay, evaluating the limit, we'll just simply substitute as well. So 1 squared minus 2 times 1 plus 3. Okay, so may makuha pa rin tayong value, the same lang. Okay, so the limit exists. Okay, so nasatisfy yung ating second condition. So for our third condition, titignan natin parehas ba yung nakuha natin sa dalawang function or dalawang condition, 1 and 2. Okay, so check. Okay, equal. So parehas 2 yung nakuha natin. That's why we can say that f of 1 is f of 1 is equal to the limit of x squared minus 2x plus 3 as x approaches 1. So the three conditions were satisfied. Thus, for the conclusion, therefore, f of x is continuous at x is equal to 1. Let's try the second example. F of x is equal to x squared minus 3x plus 2 over x minus 2. So determine if this is continuous at x is equal to 0. So x equal to 0 na yung given natin. Okay. So use the three conditions for continuity. For the first condition, substitute 0 to x. So we have f of 0. So 0 squared minus 3 times 0 plus 2 over 0 minus 2. And thus, we get the value of 2 over negative 2, which is negative 1. Okay, so we got a value of negative 1. So, nasatisfy yung first condition. Let's move to the second condition. So, we'll evaluate the limit of the function at x approaches 0. So parehas lang naman ang gagawin. We'll simply substitute the given c value. Okay, so we have 0 squared minus 3 times 0 plus 2 over 0 minus 2 as well. And that is also equal to negative 1. Thus, the second condition is satisfied. Okay, so for our third condition, okay, so equal ba yung nakuha natin sa dalawang condition? So yes, we get a value of negative 1 for both first and second condition. Thus, f of 0 is equal to the limit of x squared minus 3x plus 2 over x minus 2 as x approaches 0. So to conclude, so f of x is continuous at x is equal to 0. Okay, so now baguhin natin yung value for our x. So same function pero iba yung iba yung value ng ating x. Okay, so for our third one, okay, so same function lang po pero we will test the continuity of this function at x is equal to 2 naman. Okay, so tingnan natin. So for our first condition, anong gagawin? So we will be simply substituting 2 sa ating x's. So we have f of 2, okay? So 2 squared minus 3x plus 2 over over 2 minus 2. Okay? So we got answer of 4 minus, so this is 3 times 2. 4 minus 6 plus 2 is 0. And 2 minus 2 is 0. So indeterminate. Okay, so wala tayong nakuhang value. Okay, constant value. That's why. Okay, so masabi natin na hindi na satisfy yung first condition. So let's have the second one. We'll be evaluating the limit of x squared minus 3x plus 2 over x minus 2 as x approaches 2. Okay, so nakita na natin na indeterminate yung ating form. So we can factor out the numerator to simplify our function. So x squared minus 3x plus 2 is equal to x minus 2 times x minus 1. Okay, so x over x minus 2 as x approaches 2. So cancel out x minus 2. We will just evaluate the limit of x minus 1 as x approaches 2. Okay, so simply substitute 2 to x minus 1. So we get 2 minus 1. And for our final answer, so the limit is equal to 1. Okay, so meron tayong nakuhang limit which is 1. Pero dun sa unang condition, indeterminate. So for our third condition, are they equal? Okay, so f of 2 is not equal to the limit of x squared minus 3x plus 2 all over x minus 2 as x approaches 2. Okay, so hindi sila equal. So hindi na satisfy yung third condition. So thus, okay, we can simply say that the condition, okay, ayan, condition 1 is not satisfied. Therefore, f or our function is not continuous at x is equal to 2. Okay, so that's it for the testing of the continuity of a given function without graphing the function. Okay, so continuity of a function on an interval naman, so hindi lang basta c yung given natin. Okay, so interval na po siya. So from 0, for example, from 0 to positive infinity, okay, so or for 0 to from 0 to 3, okay, so we'll be testing the continuity of the function. Okay, so a function f is said to be continuous from the left at x is equal to c if f of c is equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches c from the left. Okay, so a function is said to be continuous from the right. So on the other hand, a function f is said to be continuous from the right at x is equal to c if f of c is equal to the limit of our function as x approaches c from the right. Okay, so let us now consider the graph of f of x is equal to square root of x. Okay, so using the given graph, we'll be determining if the function f of x is continuous on the following interval. So for letter A, so is the graph continuous from 0 to positive infinity? Okay, so for intervals, kapag parenthesis ang ginamit, meaning hindi included yung number. Okay, so for this, hindi included si 0, okay, to positive infinity. Okay, so as we can see and look at the graph, so continuous yung ating function from 0, okay, to positive infinity. So extended ang graph natin to positive infinity. So that's why for letter A, continuous yung ating graph. Okay, so for the solution, and so we will have to trace the graph from the right side of x is equal to 0, okay, to x is equal to infinity. So we can trace it without lifting the pen. Hence, we can say that the function f is continuous on the interval 0 to positive infinity. For letter B, so interval 0 to 4 naman, so is the graph or function continuous at 0 hanggang 4? Okay, so we can trace the graph from the right side of x is equal to 0 and from the left side of x is equal to 4 without lifting the pen. So asan ba yung x equal to 0 hanggang 4? So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So from 0 hanggang aabot tayo sa x equal to 4. Okay, so wala tayong na-encounter na interruption, hole, or any jump. Okay, so hence we can say that the function is continuous on the interval 0 to 4. For our third interval, we have negative infinity to 0. Okay, so negative infinity is yung sa leftmost part hanggang 0. Okay, so wala tayong makikitang graph sa negative infinity hanggang 0. So there's no graph that can be traced. Hence, the function is discontinuous at negative infinity to 0. Okay, so that's for our first example. Now let's try this graph. Okay, so and we will test the continuity for the following interval. So for letter A, we have from negative 1 hanggang 2, x equal to negative 1, 2x is equal to 2. Saan ba yun? So negative 1 to hanggang x equal to 2. Okay, so we'll trace the graph from negative 1 hanggang makaabot tayo sa 2. Okay, so we do not encounter any interruption in our tracing of the graph. That's hence we can say that the function f of x is continuous on interval negative 1 to 2. Okay, so for letter B, we have 0 to 3. Okay, so 0 to 3, saan ba yan? Ito yan, 0 to 3. Okay, so we have a closed interval, meaning included yung 0 and 3. So, hindi parenthesis ang ginamit natin. Okay, so included si x equal to 0, nasan yon? X equal to 0 is here, and x equal to 3 is here. So, let us trace the graph from 0 to 3. Okay, so pagdating sa 3, naka-encounter tayo ng hole. So since included si 3 sa ating interval, Okay, so we can say that our graph or function is not continuous. So from zero x equal to 0, we didn't lift the pen upon tracing not until on x is equal to 3. So which is a hollow dot. So since the given is a closed interval at 3, okay, so like what I have said earlier, so therefore f of x is not continuous on interval 0 to 3. Okay, so kung ang given natin ay 0 to open interval, okay, so parenthesis yung nandito kay 3. So pwede nating sabihin na continuous yung ating function. For letter C, okay, so for interval x equal to -4 to x equal to -1, okay, so we have an open interval here. So hindi included si -4 and -1. Okay, so nasan ba yun? Tingnan natin sa graph. Si x equal to -4. Okay, so here it is. So for -1, okay, so we'll be tracing the graph from -4 to -1. Okay, so pagdating dito sa -2 pa lang, so we have encountered a cut in the graph. So that's why, hence we can say that the graph is not continuous for the given interval -4 to -1. So there is a gap at x is equal to -2. For, for the last item, for interval -2 to 3 naman, so -2 hanggang 3. Okay, so we have an open interval. So hindi included si -2 and si +3. So we will trace the graph from the right of -2, okay, up to the left of +3. Okay, so even if we have a hole or hollow dot here for -2 and 3, so dahil nga in open interval, hindi sila included, so we can still say that the graph is or the function is continuous at -2 to 3. Okay, so that's it for the testing of continuity at a given interval, okay, and at a given value c. So now we'll be solving some problems for on continuity. So suppose at t minutes, we have r of t meters is the radius of the circular oil spill from a ruptured tank. Okay, and r of t is equal to 4t squared. We have a piecewise function here. Okay, so 4t squared plus 20 if t is between 0 and 2. So if t is less than 1 naman, we have 16t plus 4. Okay, so we'll be testing the continuity, okay, at x is equal to 2. So test daw natin at x equal to 2. Okay, so since ang given natin ay x equal to 2, ang gagamitin nating condition is the first one. So 40 squared plus 20. Okay, so for testing the three conditions, we'll be using the first one. Okay, so r of 2 will simply substitute 2 to t. So r of 2, that is equal to 4 times 2 squared plus 20, that is equal to 36. Okay, so evaluate the limit of r of t as t approaches 2. Okay, so we also have 36. Okay, so equal yung nakuha natin for the two conditions. Thus, we can say that this function is continuous at x is equal to 2. Okay, so even if we have the piecewise function here, okay, so as we test the limit, nakakuha tayo ng value. That's why na-satisfy yung second condition. Okay, so and also the third one. Okay, so and that's it for the problem solving on continuity. Okay, so again, since all three conditions are satisfied, therefore R is continuous at 2. Okay, so that's it for the continuity of functions. So you may go to the Google Classroom for week 3 activities.